Hello and welcome to So to Speak. I'm Lyle Broniger, and I'm joined with my my nice co-host Josh Weinberg today.
Nice. Is that all I am to you?
Yes, you're simply a co-host, nothing more. Today we're going to talk about band experiences because maybe this has been brought up in the past, but Josh and I have experiences in musical groups and working with artists and the like. I'm a seasoned bass player myself, and Josh is a very highly established drummer.
Oh, you flatter me.
I do. So this will be a little intimate discussion. We won't go into names, and we won't go into too many details surrounding the people involved with the bands themselves, just for their discretion. So, how shall we start? I sort of start where you drop at one point, so maybe you can take it away, Josh.
All right. Well, to provide some context for those that were probably thinking, I have been playing music since I was probably around, I want to say, 7 or 8 years old. It started with piano. You know, you do recitals. It's the kid stuff when you do lessons. Then I started playing trumpet in 5th grade.
Oh, nice.
And aside from school recitals or any sort of like band, like you go to other schools to play music. The thing in our Wonderland episode I mentioned when I played at Wonderland, that's all small fry stuff. Once I started playing drums, which would have been around grade 11, so in 2009, that was when things got really interesting because, okay, now I'm at an age where my tastes are widening and, you know, the peer group, trying to find other people that play instruments, it was a little bit challenging, but I started off playing at Thornley, which is our high school. Evan can also vouch for this fact. They have what are called soft rock cafes, so people can sign up. It's like talent shows, basically. People can sign up to sing, or in my case, play a drum solo for 5 minutes, and that was fun. Would have also played a spirit assembly in the last year of 12th grade, but that ended up falling through.
Much like you, I was also a trumpeter in my band, and I was in like the jazz band. I played bass for my jazz band always, and I also did the trumpet as well. And I think at one point there were only 3 people in the entire school that were picked to do honor band, which is like a huge province-wide event where schools from all over the district come and play with each other. And out of the 3 people, I was one of the ones picked because I practiced a heck of a lot, and I managed to get into I managed to get selected, and that was pretty cool because we actually managed to play at the. It used to be called the John Labatt Center. Now it's called Budweiser Gardens. But it was this big live televised event where he played in this massive stadium, and that was really that was definitely an interesting experience to say the least. Because I'm so used to going to see shows there, and now I'm the show. It's me and hundreds of other players. So here I'm just getting notes, and everyone else is playing notes. It was a really fun experience. It broadened my horizons a lot.
That actually sounds really cool. I wonder if there's video of that anywhere.
I honestly don't know. I wish I could find some, but that was way back when I was in grade 11 or 12. I think it was grade 12. So I was a senior at that point. And there were many other like concerts that we went to that we'd play, you know, for the school, and sure, that's fine stuff. But there was also like competitions we'd go into. I remember one time my music teacher had a nervous breakdown because she was like, we weren't really getting the material, and I was trying. I was like one of the younger people in the band, so like it was hard, and it's just like, guys, we should do better, and it's like I feel bad. But then we got into the competition. I think we got gold actually. So I don't know. Maybe that was all part of our plan. There was a method to the madness, so to speak. So it whipped us into shape. So I really liked being in concert bands and playing with groups of people and learning how to play a classical instrument like a trumpet. Although there was a time when I was in grade 8 where I was starting to lose my vision. So I was starting to develop migraines at random intervals. So sometimes I would miss shows because I'd vomit in the morning, and I would just be like unable to play. So that was a bad transitional period for me, grade 8 and grade 9, until I learned, oh yeah, glasses will prevent me from gaining blurry vision. Who would have thought?
Wow, so you only got glasses in ninth grade.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was a late bloomer, I suppose.
It was funny though, going back briefly to the whole playing trumpet thing. I originally did want to play drums as far back as when I was 10, but there was a lottery in fifth grade music class where everybody had to pick an instrument out of a hat, and I got stuck with trumpet. So I had to wait about 4 more years, no, 6 more years to actually play the drums like I wanted.
Oh, that's cool. So, what inspired you to want to pick up drums?
Um, it's hard to say at this point, just because I started, I guess, because I'm a very rhythmic person by nature, and especially with an instrument like the drums, you're the core of anything that's being played. So it gives a lot more control over what I feel I can bring or what I can offer, and especially with my tastes being as wide as they were in my early mid 20s, and I guess even now, I'm very open to learning how to switch things up on a dime and incorporate stuff like time signatures or different styles and sort of trying to get feedback from other people to make myself better. And especially with the drums, like those are going to be the most prominent thing people hear because it's like I think in that Sound City documentary, Dave Grohl said that the drums are like the heartbeat of a song.
Yes. Yeah, and it's also incredibly. This is going to be a recurring theme in my side of the stories, but getting a really good drummer is an incredibly arduous process. Because not only do you have to be good at what you do, you have to commit, and you have to be into like the band's music. Otherwise, it's like they're not going to stick, and they're just going to maybe take off or something. Yeah, I think it's kind of funny when I first got a guitar. My parents got me a bass guitar. It was just this nice, red Fender. I always like red Fenders. They always click with me. Cause like I would have gotten a guitar, but the problem is that my hands were too large, so it was more comfortable for me to play a bass. And I think the reason why I actually shifted, there were two people early on in my life that made me want to go bass instead of guitar. There was Paul McCartney, naturally. He's usually like a good first beginner's influence because I was just looking at a poster of the Beatles and I was like, who's that handsome guy? And he's like, oh, that's Paul. What did he play? He played bass. Cool. So I started paying attention to his life more. Um, and then the second person was actually Wolfgang Van Halen. Because when I was young, the first concert I ever saw was Van Halen when they were doing that big tour with David Lee Roth was back and Wolfgang was filling in for Michael Anthony. And he was like 16, 17 at the time. And I'm like, wow, he's only a few years older than me. He's filling up stadiums. That's so interesting. That's so exciting. Good for him. I hope to do that someday. So, yeah, he was a major influence too. And it's kind of, I think the first song I ever learned was, it was either Peter Gunn or Smoke on the Water. Usually those are the early starts, but that was, I don't know, ever since then, I kind of oscillate between guitar and bass because my dexterity is getting a lot better, but overall, I just prefer bass because I feel like it's kind of an underrated instrument, but that's just me. I've definitely developed a lot over the years. I've been playing for about 10, 12 years now. But, that's just the origins of our developments. But, what became afterward? What did you do afterwards after the first band you were in?
After the first band, so again, it was like there was a weird period where I did actually leave the first band in I think 2015 ish because I just I wasn't feeling it anymore, and I was trying to find something where maybe I'd have a little more creative control. Because a lot of the drummers I was influenced by, I mean, I've mentioned it before. I am and will always be a Neil Peart fan. Just not only
great.
because of how, not just because of how he played the drums, but because he was someone that was a very, very passive person in the sense that he didn't really like being around a lot of people, and I kind of am like that too to a good extent.
Yeah.
But he also wrote pretty much all the lyrics of all, not only all the great Rush songs, but like most of the songs they've done since he first joined. And to me, that's someone that they are pulling their share, and especially since most people think the drums just keep the beat, but it's also kind of how I approach life in a way. I'm very much like I want to be involved. I want to help people bring out the best in them. I think one of the other early influences drums wise was actually Nao Kawakita from Maximum the Hormone, who I've mentioned in one of the favorite albums episodes.
Yeah, you
But
did.
I got into Maximum the Hormone pretty big around 2011, and so that whole period was just like the mix of like being able to play really aggressively, but then also still have that pop sense of melody at times, especially when it comes to writing hooks. It's the summer of 2010, and I'm working at a day camp in the recording studio. It's my third year there, and my specialist is this guy that plays guitar, and he was interesting, I suppose. We at the time we had similar tastes, but keep in mind, when you're 18, your tastes are only broadening, you would think. And this person was at the time, I believe, 23. So there's about a 5, almost 6 year age gap. So just keep that in mind for some later details. So
Oh yes.
now
age gaps.
this person does not last very long in my job. He gets fired, and from what I gathered, he wasn't super into working with kids, anyways. But then I had to feel that activity for the rest of the day, and my old coworker was brought back at the beginning of the next week. But that's not where the story ends. So now we fast forward to around the fall of 2010, and I get a call from this person who I guess I kept in touch with at the time, and he asked if I wanted to drum in a band that he was starting with his high school friend that played bass. And this friend, I would find out, was also about 4 years older than me. So I was, at the time, I was like 18, almost 19, playing with these people in their mid-20s. So that felt a little awkward. But, it was a typical garage band experience. But, when you have the suffix, when you have a genre suffix at the end of your band name, it doesn't exactly, bode well for not getting pigeonholed.
Did they live up to their name though?
I don't necessarily think so. I think there were, at the time, mind you, and this is over a decade ago at this point, so obviously tastes would have changed, times have changed. There was some kernels of potential, but I will say I played my first show with them. It was in the same place we usually practice, in the bassist's basement, in January of 2011. It was a small basement show with, like, their friends mostly, so it was fun playing for people, but at the same time, I still felt like I was really trying to get a grasp of my instrument. And that was sort of the start of trying to, play shows every so often, whether it just be like play like rehearsals in the basement or actually try to get gigs at various places, which we didn't really end up having any major gigs until probably the summer of 2012, when we played a place that no longer exists, as is the running theme with most of the places I play at. Then it was fine, but we mostly played as a trio, except like then we added, I guess, a high school friend of this main person in 2013. They only played for a few shows before they leave because they had life stuff going on, and that probably should have been the first sign that, okay, maybe it's like if they're starting to get serious about their life, at this point I'm like 21, maybe I should consider doing the same. But, everything goes along just fine. Other people come in, to varying degrees of live performance stuff. In around late 2014, I had my first actual relationship, and one of the first times that we met up was her seeing a show of that, and there's like YouTube footage of it, which is, again, it's this whole thing is like, as Peter Gabriel put it in the genesis behind the music, this is all a healthy part of my growing up, essentially. Even though I was like 22, it's still kind of, better late than never.
Yeah.
It was, once it gets to the mid 2010s is where it gets, my life. I was, I had finished school, was out of school for a year working, then in 2016 went back to school, and the only real significant gig I played with that band was mostly because of my own doing. Lee's Palace, I'm sure you've heard of that venue.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's one of the biggest
Now,
places in Toronto.
Yeah, I know Lyle and I have mentioned before, at the beginning of this, that we're not going to name any names for, privacy's sake and everything, but venues, I think most people, especially with that venue, they know that very well. And, a lot of the places I play don't really exist in the same form anymore. Yeah. But the only reason we played Lee's Palace was because I was able to get us the very first slot, the opening slot, on like a local band night. And then to make matters worse, I was a full-time student then in my second semester of an IT program at college. Ooh. So imagine having to have your fourth of 5 straight exams and then have a show that evening.
That sounds rough, buddy.
It was a mood, all right.
It was a mood.
I got through it. It was good because, I had never really thought I would ever play any sort of, even if it's a mid-tier venue, it's a venue people know and
Yeah.
some people came to. And it was fun, but at the same time, at that point, the main bassist was not in there. We had someone else that was in a different band and a different friend that the main person knew, all who
Oh.
also had the same name, which was totally not confusing. And it was kind of like a surreal thing because like I couldn't even really network or get to know any of the other bands because as soon as we finished, I then had to get all my stuff and get back home so I could sleep so then I could be at school bright and early for my final exam the next day. So a note to anybody listening that's a full-time student, if you're going to pursue music, either do that or school first. Don't do both at the same time. It's not going to end well.
I'm actually very jealous you played at Lee's Palace. I've always wanted to like actually do a show there, because it's kind of a grungy place. I will not lie, but it has character, and
It definitely has charm.
Yeah, there's something to it. I can't put my finger on. I think it's the amazing artwork that's littered all over the front of the building. It makes it stand out for sure. But what became of your band like shortly after like Lee's Palace or stuff? Because you moved on to other stuff, so I'm just curious.
I did kind of skip over a period in 2015, but that kind of is falling into, I guess, a second band. So I'll get to that in a little. So 2017 was when I think maybe it was 2016, one of those years, where the original bass player sort of sat us down. We went to have lunch at what used to be the Pickle Barrel at the mall near where I now live. It no longer exists, as is the running theme. But basically, he was about to finish his program in college, and he was, getting serious about his work, and he kind of wanted to stop playing in our band, which, made sense. He at that point he was almost 30, and it's like, it's time to really get serious about life. And so we had one final, I guess, jam session together this summer of 2017, and I haven't seen him since, but he seems like he's doing well for himself, and I felt like, okay, maybe after this point, because the last proper show was just the original person that guy that I used to work with, and me playing a show on April Fool's Day at this bar that also no longer exists, and it just kind of felt like what am I doing at this point? I should have probably taken the hint to probably leave a few years earlier, but I didn't think much of it. But I'm like, okay, now I'm back at school, things are gonna be, a little easier. I have a whole archive that this person made of all the live footage of like various rehearsals, live shows, all that stuff for the most part. The stuff I chose to keep. But like there are, how you have when you watch like a really awkward video or you audibly cringe whenever you watch something.
Yeah.
I get a lot of that recently because like some of it just felt like I was doing okay, but when most people that come to see you are the other people's friends and they're there mostly for them, and like even in some live videos I will hear people like chanting his last name and not the band name. I'm like, okay, something's not right here.
We'll have to talk about him a little bit more as a stage performer because like I've had some stories too with him, but we'll get to that when we cross that bridge. I have a feeling that's going to take the brunt of this conversation, honestly.
Oh, it will. At least with some of the first band shows, sometimes we did get some pay. I mean, especially with Lee's Palace, that was the only real professional show we did where everybody got a good share, I'd say. But most of the time it went into like a band fund thing, which is like when he needed to get any new equipment or anything, or it would be in like the band fund. But I sometimes would get like $20 here and there. Sometimes I got paid for my share, sometimes not, but at least in most cases, the band technically got paid, and we'll see how crucial that is later on.
Yeah.
And just so that combination of trying to write really strong songs that also at least either tell a story or something that I can feel proud of. And at the time, I didn't really feel too proud with a lot of the material coming out of that first band. Especially since, when you're someone in your mid-late 20s or even early 30s later on and you're writing stuff that, teenagers would probably scoff at.
Yeah.
So in 2015, I think my parents had suggested to try and look for new bands to join in Kijiji because they obviously didn't want me to give up on playing drums. So I came across this one band that they had a link to, I think, their demo or a 6-song EP that was on Bandcamp, and I liked it for the most part. It was pretty good, kind of like earnest alt rock mixed with a little bit of pop punk. So I went to, I think, a rehearsal factory that's Midtown-ish. That was like the first time I'd ever been to a like shared rehearsal space outside of the first band. We won a contest for like an hour or a couple hours of rehearsal space at this rehearsal studio that went fine, but nothing ever really came of it other than some video that I have not watched in years. But I decided, I'm going to try joining the second band, but it did really much feel like I was like just the drummer. I did learn how to play to a click in that band, which is always useful to know how to play to a set BPM, but there were different BPMs for each song, and I'd have like, in my headphones or something that would have the click in there to keep track with, but I couldn't really contribute much songwriting wise. It was kind of like I had to play almost exactly what was there, which it helped me establish a regimen, but at the same time it kind of felt like they were definitely more serious about really wanting to play more often and tour than I was. But I did at least hone something that I had done in the first band, which was I tried to actually get into the actual industry side of things with like I had wanted to do A&R since I was like maybe 21, 22, because in the first band I would send out demos to a whole bunch of labels that I thought of, and I'd get some feedback. Sometimes I wouldn't get any, but the feedback I got sometimes was, I would explain that obviously this is like potato quality, so it's not going to be great, but like we want just some feedback if we're on the right track. And sometimes be like, yeah, there's some potential here. We'd definitely be happy to hear more of what you have. And I would take that and be like, see, we can really try and polish things up and improve it, and we can actually get people to like listen to us, and then we just have to play more, and that's how this starts. But it never went anywhere. In the second band, it kind of went somewhere since we did keep track of like we made a list of all the places we sent the demo to, and it seemed still that we'd have to play more often. But I only ended up playing about I think three shows total, and like for only a few months, because I realized the second show we played at the main guitarist's and the singer, his family lived in northern Quebec, so we went all the way up there. And that's when I realized that I might have some sort of separation anxiety or homesickness, because I almost had a panic attack like a few hours before, because I did not like being away from home. And I got through it, but I definitely remember sleeping on a blow-up mattress at the end of the night, and it was really hot in a basement, and I was just like, this is not the life I want for myself. And it was it was like I had to basically be at the cottage, and then we had to have a bunch of people that I had not really gotten to know that well, like in our house basically, and it just and I had to like bring a bunch of cymbals in a car for like, I think 3 or 4 more hours. Anyways, the show itself, like playing with them was fine, but I just tried to, I said, I feel like I need to quit because I'm not a touring musician, and I just really sort of was overwhelmed by the amount of stuff. And, they did give me a little bit of flack about it at the time, and I did it, and I do understand that now looking back, that like I probably really should have given it some more thought. But, after, the 2015 as a year was not great for me, between like being out of school but not having any job prospects and having my first real breakup. It was kind of a combination of not being in a great place for myself, and the other guitarists in the band kind of said some stuff that I took a little harshly at the time, but he wasn't wrong about you can't live with your parents forever, and I'm like, I know that, but I need to get myself on a path to where I want to be proud of what I'm doing, and I don't want to be. I feel like I can work on music and not be too far from home. So I played one last show, I think in the fall of 2015 with them at this place in Oshawa called the Mustache Club, which also no longer exists. Take a shot. Man. But that was kind of fun in the sense that at least it's another place people know of and people like prominent acts have played there. And it seemed like there was a bit more of a crowd there that was there for the band and not just for one of us. And I feel like in a way things we parted ways pretty amicably. I do know they're still going, and I think they are probably still working on new stuff. They're fairly small, but I remember when they opened for another band that I had done some review coverage of and like their stuff. So we'll see. It was just kind of an example of just because you join a band online, at least for me, chemistry is not necessarily something you can force. No. And for me, I need to really be able to spend time with people to know if I can trust them and if I want to continue to be around them. And if I don't get a good feeling, then I'm just not going to move forward.
Yeah, I'm actually quite envious because I've never had the opportunity to tour with a band before.
I wouldn't say tour. It was like one show at some place in Brampton, one show, the one in Quebec, and then the Mustache Club. That's only like a single hand's worth. And
That's
if I
more
had
than I
tried to
got.
stick it out, I could have gotten more done. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
but
It's kind of odd. It's like I don't know if it's anything to be jealous of. If my heart wasn't necessarily in it, but I will say that demo or that 6 song EP that's on Bandcamp still. I do still listen to some of those songs from time to time, and even some of the newer songs that they were working on, which I did sort of have to learn how to play live. Some of those I still come back to as sort of like though they're a place in time, and I think it was a healthy experience, and I ended up going back to school the next year anyway, so I was fine with it.
yeah, it's too bad, but it seems like you were kind of having a rough patch, so it's understandable.
Yeah. Oh, and it gets funnier. That was the
Oh,
same summer where I read Ready Player One in Armada, so
that is a rough patch, buddy.
yeah.
But that's a fairness claim. We have that man just is like a magnet to our podcast. He keeps getting pop. He pops in every now and then. Yeesh. Kind of curious about more of the band because there's one band that we have where it's interesting, where you left and I joined, and I want to know what the genesis of this was. Like, how did you get
Well,
started with this? Because this guy that we talked about earlier, the one with the suffix with the genre sort of thing, this is where we can like get into him.
yeah. So at the time, I had finished my final college program, and I was home for about 6 weeks without any work, and so then I tried looking for work, and I found work, and I started working in a library, and that was fine at the time. But I got a message from that person saying that they had started a new band and would I want to drum in that one. I, of course, was a little apprehensive based on how the first one ended, but I thought, it's been a few years. Maybe they'll be able to take some more constructive feedback. They'll be more receptive to other people that want to write, and maybe this will be different because at that point they're in their like 30s, so like maybe there's some maturity there.
You'd think, yeah.
I just got a weird vibe at first because the other person, this is a new person apparently that he had met, I guess through his work or through some other shared place, that they used to do some TV work back in the late 90s that other people would be known for. But in hindsight, I'm thinking, I don't really think that's a good idea to anchor your band around in that sense. But also, that person was in their, like, I think, early 40s. And that was
Yeah,
just,
and
I
she had
already
a
got kind of a
family.
weird vibe between the two of them, as I
Mm.
would later find out. But it seemed like it was a bit more of a chill approach in terms of the songs. Like they were a little bit more melodic, focus on harmonies,
Well,
but it still was very much a focus on the two of them. And
yeah,
I was just the background guy.
yeah. I
And
felt the
at
same
this
way.
point, there was like a music video that we had shot or worked on shooting in, I think, early 2018, where Evan was directing it.
Yeah, he
But
did.
it was just an example of the disconnect, because half of it was filmed at one of their places, and then the other half was filmed at my house in the basement. Oh yeah, and then part of it was like we were tied up to a pole. I was like, nope.
My favorite part of the video is the last few frames. All three of you are staying together. You have that last, you're holding the last note, and they're both smiling, and you just kind of have this "kill me now" look on your face. And
Yeah, I was not very subtle about my displeasure with that,
I
and
could tell.
it seemed like there was a lack of cohesion in terms of like the creative vision, because I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
working with Evan was fine, and it was sort of like what helped us really reconnect that year, because at least he would be able to get some of my ideas in there. But just if you watch that video, it just felt like there was it felt very basic, and the whole like tying things up it felt kind of weird. But
yeah.
then I'm going to move forward to, I think, February of 2018, where we play our first actual live show at a venue, and
Was
there's
that?
no bassist anyway, so I don't even know why we didn't even try to find one yet,
Mm,
because you can't really play with just guitar, singing, and drums unless you're like Royal Blood or the Black Keys or White Stripes or any other like Decimal Buffs at 1979 or any sort of duo act, of which there's not a lot that can do that really well. So we play, but then it gets better because the night before this particular gig, which, it's like $5 at the door, and then we get a message from the guitarist of a band that played the night before saying that the venue took all the door money and none of the bands got paid for that night.
Was that Cherry Blossom? Or Cherry?
No, it was Cherry something.
Yeah. No, I was on Bathurst Street or something. Yeah. Was that the one though, or no?
That was. It's
Cherry Colas. That was what it was called.
I mean, I'd heard of the venue, but at the same time, it's just more a case of. I obviously took that as a big red flag and tried to warn the rest of them, hey, if the venue's not paying people for their time played, maybe we shouldn't play. But they wanted to go ahead with it, so... And I felt really bad about that because I had brought a bunch of friends, including my now fiance and her cousin with. Yay, real life is not that stressful. Thank you.
It's getting better.
So yay, podcast world knows the truth. Ooh. Yeah. But yeah, we had just been dating for a few months at this point, and I felt bad because I brought a bunch of friends who had each paid $5, and so that's probably like $40 to $50, give or take, maybe a little more or less. My math is a little rusty, but that's money that is not going into not only our hands but nobody's hands, and it just everything felt off about it, and just like the songs were okay, but it just. As a whole, felt like it was a rough go. I mean, I did try. They were trying to get themselves out there in different ways in terms of like merch and actually trying to design proper logos. And I mean, I did help them produce a song, which I had done production for the other band before. But it's like when it's really you and one other person, it doesn't have the same. You're just like recording stuff in a basement. It's not like anything professional. But with this, it kind of felt like there was no. This person the guitarist mainly does their own thing, and the rest of us are kind of along for the ride. Even in the first band, I noticed that as well. Like, as I've mentioned before, this person really liked Green Day, and as I mentioned in that same Favorite Albums episode, it ruined the band for me in a lot of ways, especially because they will do the thing where they turn the volume off on their guitar, and then they put their hands up like they're Billy Joe Armstrong, and there's a big difference between being influenced by something and letting your influences consume you.
It's very hard for me to pin down the genre of this band because the female singer kind of had this Sarah McLachlan, like kind of like this nice soft pop kind of,
which I felt was needed for that person's prior work, but at the same time,
but then you have the other guy who was the Billy Joe Armstrong guy who's like trying so hard to be like Green Day, trying hard to be like James Hetfield, like just.
The Offspring.
Offspring is another good example,
which
too.
Is their voice reminded me so much of Dexter Holland, but whereas Dexter Holland can, be very sincere and powerful when he wants to be, it just kind of felt like if you just take the snotty punk energy of the early stuff, but you take out everything that makes that notable, you're not left with that much. And essentially after that gig, maybe the song, I tried putting one of the songs into this CBC Searchlight contest thing. We didn't make it past the first round, and I'm like, the song's not that great anyway, so I'm like, I'm not surprised we didn't. But it was at that stage where I had just started being a music reviewer the previous year. I felt like I was building a professional reputation, and I really didn't want it to be tarnished by people that were not that great and didn't really want to hear otherwise, because trying to convince one person that they aren't that great is hard, but at least if you have someone else in the band that is on your side, it's a little easier. When it's 2 against 1, you've got no chance.
No. The one would always kiss the other one's ass too. Like I guess this is kind of around the time I was starting to get told about this band because Evan. One day I'm just working.
Good old Evan.
Yeah. Thanks, Evan. I was at work and sweeping the floor or something, and he was just like, "Hey, Lyle, do you play instruments?" I'm like, yeah, I play guitar and bass. I was like, "Oh, cool. This band needs a bassist." And I'm like, "All right." I never considered being in a band at that point because I just never, I always fantasized about it, but I never really thought much about actually doing it because I didn't know how to get through the channels. I didn't know about Kijiji and stuff. So Evan gets me in touch with them, and I do an audition of sorts. I go all the way to their house, and I play for them for like, I learned their songs. They weren't really that complicated on bass, but like I was learning them pretty quickly, and they were just like, yeah, well, we have a few people in mind, but we'll let you know. The next day, it's like, hey, Lyle, you're in our band. I'm like, cool. Good to know. But then I was like, oh, yeah, and then you're going to meet Josh, and we're going to, you're going to get to know. But then, like, I think the next day was when you, is unceremonious a good word? Or was it kind of...
I'd say came to my senses.
Well, yes, I do not blame you, but it's like, oh, I really wanted to meet this Josh guy because he was the only one in the band I didn't meet. Well, here we are,
yeah.
But anyways.
Suffice to say that 2018 was like a lot of weight was lifted off my shoulders and a lot of good came back into my life because at that time I was working, I was wanting to get more hours at the library, and I also kind of felt like between that one gig and just the general like I'm trying to actually be serious about, getting the music better so that, at least we can actually put something out that doesn't suck. And just essentially being tired of that guy and realizing that he hadn't really changed, and especially with the dynamic between the two of them, it was going to go sour and it was going to affect my interest in even being a musician, and I did not want to stick around for that. So I basically put it as I need to step away from the band because I want to work more in my career, and I was getting more serious with my fiance. So I felt like this was a good time. It's like that aha moment when one of the other guitarists left the first band, and then when the original bassist left that first band, where they're getting their lives in order, and they don't need to play a little part-time band. And that was it for me. And I didn't say exactly, I'm quitting because I don't like you or because you haven't changed, even though I've tried to point out several times how easy it is to take these things into account. Maybe if I had like the wherewithal to hold some sort of intervention with some of my friend group and some of his, if they were willing, maybe it would have worked. Maybe it wouldn't have. But I didn't outright say that anything bad. I just said I need to leave, and he respected that and he understood. And then a weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I moved on with my life. But unfortunately, that also meant that while I was leaving a sinking ship, you were just boarding one.
You dodged a bullet, and I came right into its path. So I guess it's my turn to share my perspective on this group. So naive little me, 23-year-old Lyle, joined his first band in the big city. I put a lot of time and effort into trying to learn the songs, while also trying to add my own spin on things, because I can't tell you how boring it is as a bassist to be like parroting. I call it parroting. I think Geddy Lee calls it this too, where you just follow what the guitarist does. So I kind of do like counter melody, or I'd add like, scales and stuff. And it was pretty good. I was kind of like on good terms with the both of them. And while they were searching for a drummer, we'd often do like practices. And we were learning, like a lot of their stuff was pretty fucking easy. It was mostly like 2-chord songs. And it's like A, D, 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 A.
And the thing is, the guitarist like went to school for guitar and has a diploma and stuff.
School. I know. Yeah, I saw a certificate.
And he can play jazz stuff too. Like he had decent chops when he wanted to use them. I just don't know if he ever quite felt like using them in a way where it was going to work with other people.
I remember one time I was at a practice with them and another guitarist, a good friend of mine, who kind of was in the band for a very, very short period.
He may have even been on this podcast before.
He hasn't actually, no.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'm thinking of the wrong person.
Same name, though. I know what you're getting at, yes. But, and it was just me, the girl, and him, and because he was away, and, kind of covertly, he's just like, yo, I hate to say it, but man, this guy's writing style is really straightforward and basic. Like, he doesn't really pull any surprises or anything, and I'm just curious why he writes like that. And then the girl was like, oh, well, is there anything we can do to improve the music? And I was just like, write new music. It's just like you can't fix this. The only way to go is to evolve your music style. So this guitarist joined the band eventually, and we also chance encounter. We're in the Sugar Beach rehearsal factory, just practicing. We were about to leave, and then I was getting ready to pack up, but then the girl's like, "Oh, Lyle, come into this room. We met someone," and there was this older gentleman who was playing drums, and he was just like, "Oh, you guys are in a band? Oh, I'll play with you. Let's see what we can do." And he was magnificent. I'm not besmirching you, Josh. I'm just saying this guy was a progressive.
I've seen
drummer.
the guy play though, and from like what I can tell of him overall, he was a good guy. So it was good that you got to play with someone there.
Yeah,
good.
He was a progressive drummer. He actually almost formed his own band somewhere around the 70s or 80s, and he almost had a record deal and almost went touring, but a few of them got cold feet and the band dissolved. But he's doing very well for himself. He's a real estate agent. He's very busy, and he is an incredibly kindred soul. Very supportive, very conscious, very, very well versed in the dynamic of a band. And he was the smartest one in the group. He was the most prompt and very punctual, and he always knew what to say. And he was never negative, which is something I wish I kind of took more notice of, because like it got very frustrating by the end of the turn with this band. So our first gig together was at the Smiling Buddha, which at the time...
Which I think I might have said probably not to do, because there was some stuff that I had read about and like seen going on in the local community at the time, and I was like, guys, maybe don't do this.
The manager had many allegations around him. There was a lot of like bad things to be told about the place, and a lot of backhanded stuff, a lot of like dirty.
Gee, another red flag that was ignored. I wonder why.
Yeah, so yeah, like what you said of another group, and it's just another venue where it's like maybe we shouldn't go there, but they were like, oh, we need to go. And honestly, I think, no exaggeration, I think that was our best show. For my tenure with this band, that was our best show. Because we were together, it was fun. The guy there's one song we had where I kind of had this nice bass lead in, but this guy called it a bass solo, so he was like, everyone, get a hand for Lyle Graniger! And like, it's like a 10-second bass solo, and when I was done, it's like, everyone's like, and I was like, I feel kind of stupid. So then I told him,
the energy was like totally in the wrong place.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't do that for someone like when it doesn't lead in, unless it leads right into the song, but it didn't. There was an awkward space in between, and then the song would start. And here I am in the front, and the girl's kind of like a little too close to me, and the stage isn't very big, so. And but still, nonetheless, it was a great show. And we ended it, speaking of Offspring, with a really cool cover of Self-Esteem. And I love playing that song. It's a great bass-driven song. The drummer didn't even know how it went, but he played perfectly. The only problem is, by the end of the song, this guy, the lead singer guitarist, thought he was like Freddie Mercury at Live Aid. It's like, everybody, la 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 la, and everyone's like, okay.
Again, it's like when you're an opening band, it's good to have energy, but like, you shouldn't kid yourself.
This is the problem. This guy he wasn't very self-aware. He would often jump off the stage and kind of play around with the crowd in front of everyone, because it wasn't a big turnout, honestly. Maybe like 25, 30 people showed. But it's
probably for good reason.
Yeah, and he would often unplug himself by accident, or he would like fuck around with the mic to kind of pull it off. I was like, hello everybody! Get help!
Oh yeah, I forgot. Also, AC/DC was a band that he likes a lot, and it's like, see, that people make fun of Brian Johnson because of how like over the top it can sound, but Brian Johnson can still sing at the end of the day.
Yeah, but the problem is like it gets very cringy when you jump off the stage for the third time that night, and you unplug yourself and you look like the biggest dork, and you have like a slideshow presentation talking about the band before we play. It's all that, and even
Slideshow.
the other, yeah, we had a slideshow. It was all about them and their journey as musicians. And fuck, even before we played, like the two of them were saying, "We have worked so hard for this moment, and we're gonna kill it. You and I, we're gonna kill it." And I was just kind of on the side, like, how about we wait for the other people to join us for this band group talk? I guess you can say. So, like you said, it kind of felt like it was them, not so much us. And, yeah, it was still like a fun experience. I don't regret it. It was my first ever gig, and I think it was pretty fun. The problem is that what ended up happening was the drummer, who, you know, again, a bit up there in age, like in his 50s, he kind of like saying that, my wife wants me home more. I can't really commit anymore. I'm too busy with work, and, you know, I love you guys, but respectfully, I might not be able to do too many shows with you. So effectively, we didn't have a drummer. So during the whole 6 or so months I was with them, they didn't have any success finding a drummer after this guy. Not even like an audition, nothing. And that hurt, especially, and they actually ended up firing the other guitarist who I mentioned because they got into an argument where it's like, oh, you don't show up on time, you don't come to practice enough. And he's like, dude, I got your songs down pat. I don't have anything to add to your music. It's like, exactly. And then I think he even called the female singer short stuff, which triggered the other guy. And they had a big argument. And here I am on a film set, just kind of getting a bunch of messages and seeing all this kindergarten bullshit. But anyways, oh, and then speaking of kindergarten bullshit, I had to edit a lot of the promos they did, because like you said, they like to record themselves playing live. And that took time. Like, a lot of my time that I could have been spent, like, doing other things. But I even asked them, like, I'm pumping out, every time we do a gig, I have to edit all the footage together. Is there any chance I could get compensation, or maybe, like, a little bit of, like, money my way, just so I can get something? It's like, no, because if I paid you...
They learned nothing.
If I pay you, Lyle, then I'll have less food to put on the table for my kids. Yeah, so it was just getting to the point where I felt this massive divide between us, where I was kind of just there, and they were doing their thing. And I even offered... I remember I wrote one song for them. I sent it to him, and he was like, oh, it's very punk. I'm like, oh, good. You like punk. Maybe we could play it sometime. And it was never brought up again. So... I don't doubt it.
That also leads into some issue I have with this person, in that, again, when people's tastes are expanding, they want to get people into a whole bunch of new stuff. This person was very rigid. Whenever I would try to bring up other bands to listen to, or like try and play other stuff, it'd be like, yeah, that sounds nice. Never brought up again. Never like listened to again. And I just kind of realized, you just can't reason with some people.
Yeah, no.
Some people just aren't going to change.
So as a trio now, it was the two of them and me now, we would do things called acoustic gigs, where he would have an acoustic guitar, she would have a microphone, and I would have like a little PV amp, and I would play quietly in the background, and we would play all our really soft, long, repetitive songs, and it was still fun. I didn't regret it. It's just like it wasn't as fun as like Smiling Buddha, because we didn't have the energy without a drummer, When this was the tipping point with me and the band, we were halfway through. The drummer came back to play with us, so that was good. But like it was somewhere in the cavern, which I don't know exists anymore. It's just like this hostel where they have like a little place. I remember our good friend Brandon was the doorkeeper. And he took in the any cash that was given to the show. And they had merch and all that. But that was the tipping point for me, because, like, this guy wanted all the cameras facing him and the girl, and none on us.
That was always an issue I had, where, like, any video of it is mostly the middle of the stage, or focused on him, which leads to, like, a similar scenario where, like, I'll explain it after, but essentially, like, the only perception is you sometimes see what other people in the band are doing, unless you don't.
That kind of made me feel less like a cog in the machine and more like just like some invisible piece, which didn't feel nice. And then the other thing was, we were the only ones playing that night, so we were like, okay, so we have a pretty long set list, we'll go through it. But then, like, after we were done, they were like, so what are we gonna do now? Oh, we're gonna play through the set list again. I'm like, what are you talking about? we're done. It's like, no, we're gonna do what the Beatles did, in the early days before they're like
No,
when they're
the
in the quarry band.
Beatles. They almost tried to ruin. It almost ruined that for me too.
And they were just like, we're gonna go through the entire set list because, like, maybe new people come into the bar and they'll hear our stuff again. And I'm like, well, how long are we gonna keep this up? We'll do it once or twice, We'll see how
This
we
isn't
feel.
the 50s or 60s where you actually had like sets on and off where you played the same things over and over.
Yeah, but it was such an overlong process, and like my dad was there, and he's like, "Why are you playing the same songs again, Lyle?" It's like, it's not my decision. So, anyways, yeah. After that, I just go upstairs. I go outside with Evan. I'm just like, Evan, I can't stand this lead singer anymore. He drives me fucking crazy, and he's like, ugh, I just can't stand it. He annoys me so much, and yeah, we never found another drummer. 10, 15 gigs later, I'm burnt out. We're not progressing. We're not getting a whole lot of like exposure with these gigs because no one really shows up to them as much. I'm getting tired of it. And I think it all came to a head where, like, one practice, I'm like texting the old drummer saying, like, I don't like being in this band. I've been talking to a lot of my friends because, like, I remember one time when I asked this guy, like, how about that song? And it's like, oh, the female singer is never gonna let you have the spotlight, Lyle. So, yeah. And I was like, that's so shitty to hear. Because, like, if I had to pick one or the other, I'd say I didn't mind the female singer as much as the other guy. Because I had always sit in a car ride with him, and he would always want to talk. Sometimes I just want peace and quiet during a car ride, but he would always want to talk, and sometimes he would always reiterate the same thing he told me 2 weeks ago, or he'd show me a clip that he had in his phone that he showed me 10 times already.
The clips.
No. And it's just like, okay, I get it. We spend a lot of time together.
I kind of feel bad for Eric Nagler.
Yeah. It's like, I get it. When you spend time with a lot of people, sometimes it's hard to tell, like, what stories you told before or what stories you, like, forgot to say. And sometimes you can get repetitive. But this guy was like a Mobius strip. I just hearing the same things over and over again. But with the lady who had a family at the time, and her husband, I don't want to say he was unsupportive, but it was like he was the main breadwinner, and he had to, like, pay for everything, and she didn't. She kind of did like a few hours a week or so, but she was spending a lot of her time, money, and dedication to the band, and that was causing a really big rift in their marriage. And it's like, I don't know. I even heard like someone say to the guy, it's like, you're in your 30s now. What are you doing? You're living with your parents. Like, what is the purpose of this band? And I was starting to kind of feel dejected. I was like, I don't even know what my purpose in this band is. You don't like any of the things I write. So, then, like as I was saying, one practice I just gave up. And at the end of the practice, I was just kind of stone-faced, moody, as I usually am when I'm not in the best of spirits. And it's just like, I don't want to be in this band anymore, and I think it's time for me to quit. And they were just kind of stood there petrified as I was in the front door, getting my shoes on and holding my bass up, and they were like, oh, well, sorry to hear that. And I slammed the door in their face. Because I was tired. I was so tired. There's nothing... And the worst part is that even after I left, I knew I had to do one last show with them up in North York. And this was the finale of this saga. So we're in this Russian bar at 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. actually. It was 8 p.m. actually. So we're in this bar. I'm not sitting in the booth with them because I'm not on good terms with these people now. They're not happy that I left, but we're still gonna play together one last time. And there was every single gig playing at this concert sang in Russian. It was like, because North York, it's the Russian Jewish population. It's the main population there, but it was all Russian bands, and we were the only English band that played that night, and we kept getting pushed back, and thankfully Veronica was there to keep me company. But like, it got very boring, and like by 1 o'clock, we finally played. And the female singer was like, Lyle, I know we don't have a drummer, but can you play double time? I'm like, what? Yeah, we gotta speed through our set list. I want to go home. Well, I was hoping tonight was going to be like the final hurrah, but it's going to be a really painful whimper. So, being the only rhythmic instrument in the band, I had to speed through all of our songs, and it was messy, and he kept dicking around with his amp to get different sounds, and kept kicking it, and, like, no one was standing in front of us during the play, because everyone was gone now. And, the worst part was we played Self-Esteem yet again by Offspring, and I cannot tell you how painful it is to play that song without a drummer. It's just me going, and it's like, it's not as fun without a drummer because I don't have anyone to keep me in time, so it sucks. And then, like, yeah, that was the end of that. I shook both their hands, and I left the band for good. Months later, they messaged me on Facebook saying, so Lyle, it's been a while, but I wanted to ask, why did you leave the band? And it's like, I don't want to answer that. I have nothing good to say that's going to be constructive enough, because you don't take constructive criticism very well, even if it's constructive, but like, it's like, I don't have anything nice to say, so I'm not going to say it. Another few months later, they message Evan, and they're like, why did Lyle leave the band? So then it's like,
that's where I draw the line.
Fine. I wrote a giant manifesto basically saying all these things I didn't like being in the band, and I sent it to them, and then the guy was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to write a reply to every single thing you said and why you were wrong, and I was like, don't bother, and I just blocked him. So that was the end of my tenure with the band. And I think even like 2 years later, I found out they were completely disbanded. And I saw like clips of them still trying to keep it alive with a duo. The girl played keyboard and the guy played guitar, and it just sounded even worse. So it's like, what the fuck?
It was like the first stages of the first band I was in with that other person. When it was down to the two of us, I'm like, there's nothing here.
No, there's nothing
and
here.
A big issue I have with that person is they tended to rely on the same person to do all their booking, and they didn't really try to like actually do their own booking or book themselves in other places. And, like, when you only end up playing a lot of the same places that this person books for, you're going to end up playing a lot of the places that are, like, yeah, they might be more later in the evening and, like, headliner slots, but one of the places we played, which I don't think exists anymore, it was like we were playing at midnight. You know? Like,
yeah.
I'm not exactly a fan of, like, playing that late into the evening when you have no idea how many people are going to be there or be interested in you. That's the one thing I feel the worst about, is that we only really started to get to know each other as friends in the beginnings of while you were going through all that crap. Mm-hmm. And, you know, in terms of, like, from a songwriting perspective, I was always trying to help this person, even in the first band, really flesh stuff out. I co-wrote a song with him. And for the most part, it sounds like one of the more functioning things, because, like, about 50 to 60% of what I wrote ended up in the final song. But I used something, you know that song, He's Got the Whole World in His Hands? Mm-hmm. I tried to interpolate that or put a spin on that in the lyrics, and I think he still changed part of that, but it was, I don't know, the main thing I get from the songwriting is that in the first band there was still a lot of, like, edginess, you know. There was even a song he wrote directed at the now former camp director of the place he got fired from. I'm just kind of like, if you wanted to torpedo your job prospects, sure, then go right ahead. But I didn't realize that at the time, but also, like, I'm 18 or 19, you know. I'm not going to be that spiteful that I'm going to, you know, I'm not going to curse out someone because they fired me or because I'm not working there anymore. I'm just going to take it in stride and move on. And
he also had a blues song named after him.
I was going to get to that, which the blues on its own is a great thing, but, like, it's, you know,
it's not sung very well.
When you're that self-centered about it, it's kind of like, don't kill the blues for everybody else, please.
Yeah, that's fine, but, like, if you want to make a song about yourself, but, like, I don't know, it rubbed me the wrong way when I listened to it, so, yeah, but, and then I remember one song we were playing where it was literally the C chord for, like, 30 bars, and then the chorus, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do on bass? I'm like, just play the note. Well, you want me to go ba 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 for 30 bars? That's insane. That's not even. I feel like a machine. Can't I have like a riff or like something? And they're like, oh, fine. And it sounded so much better when we had the
Again,
boom 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 boom. Because that makes all the difference. I can play a riff endlessly, but I can't play a note endlessly. That's not good. That's not good song structure.
it comes down a lot to if you want to be a bedroom musician and do all the parts yourself, I would get that. But this person did not do all the parts themselves, or they did like they can do guitar and bass, but like you're not. It's if they're if the knowledge of it's very rote and basic, then that's what it's going to come out as,
Yeah.
and that's something I've learned from at least the little bit I've been working on songwriting with you a little bit. That when I'm given a little bit more to work with, and I write with people that they know what they want and they know that they want to get that across to people, it's easier to sort of put myself in their shoes. But when it's someone that isn't really going to change and has made clear efforts to show that they are fine with where they are,
Mm-hmm.
even if since then they have improved somewhat, but I've not talked to them in several years, I I'm just like, what was it all for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I learned a very valuable lesson. Is like I never want to come off as having an ego when I'm with the band, because that can get very
Exactly.
toxic, and that's how it felt. Did you know what ended up happening to that group?
The third group, I only found out through you and Evan, like bits and pieces of what later would end up happening. But in the back of my mind, I always suspected there was a weird schism that was going to happen at some point.
Yeah, no, I predicted it too, and it just so happened that the lead singer did eventually try to make a pass at the other singer, and that's what eventually broke up the band. And I was like, I called it. I knew because it was so weird. He was like a lapdog or something to this singer the whole time, and I was like, I can't stand people like that. I can't stand brown nosers or people or sycophants because it
Well,
makes it weird.
I can understand, when you're a teenager or someone that's relatively reserved and you don't express your feelings very well, but you think anyone that's even remotely interested in spending any time with you, even just as a friend, like, oh, they must like me. But
But she was
when
married.
you're in your 30s and she was certainly older, and there's like the whole complications of that, it's just like it just makes for an ugly situation all around.
Yeah,
And
so I have no doubt in my mind that that's probably what sunk the band.
I have no idea. Did that end up affecting the marriage stuff too?
I don't know about that because she was married with kids, so I don't talk to
I
either
wouldn't
of these
think so,
people.
but like I would imagine that would make for a little bit of a rough patch.
I don't think it was. I very much doubt it was reciprocated, if that's what you mean. So yeah.
Yeah, but that's the other funny thing I found was that this from like an artistic standpoint, the idea of making a logo and like a band is only one letter away from brand if
That's a
you're a
good.
marketing student. And while the first band that this person and I were in had a very generic looking logo that one of the bassist friends made, it was basic enough, but it didn't really catch your eye. The second band, they did like put effort into trying to like name it and put a logo behind it, but then I thought about it and I'm like, this really feels like you're trying to force two things together that are not going to mix.
I commend them for the hustle, but yeah, I agree. Also, their name was like kind of like weird. Their
It's
justification
like
for
a
the name.
religious reference, but also I'm not really sure that that's gonna. Again, it's just like It's better than just suffix punk or suffix
Hmm.
genre, if you will,
Yeah.
because that first band played a lot of punk, so adding punk at the end made sense. But this just didn't add up. And
Yeah.
also the YouTube channel, when you're gonna market yourself as these two people as something, like you basically decided that you're fine with discrediting everybody else.
Well, I mean, if you try YouTubing or Googling their name, that it gets lost in translation because literally their name is just like. I tried asking like, what was the reasoning behind your name? It's like, oh, well, our name is based on the idea that if you read any book, it's this section of the book that's where it gets interesting. And I'm like, That's so illogical,
That's
and
not how it was explained to me.
there's no basis behind that. But if I explain any further, I'd end up giving it away, and I don't want to do that. I think we should probably move on, in all honesty.
We probably should. But I think once that stuff ended, I'm like, I look back on some of the. I don't have any video of the second band I was in, unfortunately, unless my dad has like phone videos still from like 6+ years ago, which I don't know if he does. But at least when I was working and trying to still play music, I still did get kind of burned out because I'm like, I'm playing by myself. I would write stuff, even songs in my spare time, like just for me to read, really, but like for me to read through.
Mm-hmm.
But I know we jammed at one point early on when I had started working at a band.
Yeah, because I wanted to meet you.
I had kind of felt like, I've been down this road before. I don't want to get burned again.
Yeah, because I wasn't writing music.
Nothing to do with you. It just felt like it was too soon at the time.
And we lived quite far away at the time, and
that's another thing, especially because I commend you for like making the treks all over for various gatherings
with the equipment. Yeah, and I wasn't writing anything at the time, so I wasn't really interested in any formation at the time. Yeah, my band experiences after this were kind of misnomerish, if I'm being honest, and that's mainly because I will commend the last band that we did a lot of gigs, but for the next few, we mostly just practiced. And the first one, I was just scouring Kijiji looking for a band, and it was this guy in his 40s, and he was a perfectly nice guy, but I got the sense that he was kind of listless in his life because he still lived with his parents, and I'm not knocking that because sometimes it's hard living in a city and it's not easy to like kind of like get footing. But like when he's like writing all these songs while working at Value Village and just sort of like kind of eking through life, it's like I just kind of got the sense that he was directionless. And it was just me. It was me and him and the drummer who was in his 50s. So I was like the youngest one by like half. I was like half their age. But they really liked my playing, and we were really tight. And it was good. And I was like, oh, it's kind of nice to be noticed by people who have been doing this for a very, very long time. And it got to the point where it's like, we would practice weekly, but we were only practicing 10 songs. And after like almost half a year, that's all we were doing. And I even asked him, like, are we going to record any more music? Is it all? It's like, oh, we already recorded our demos, so we're ready. I'm like, ready for what? Are we going to play music to gigs? And it's like, oh, I don't know. What do you mean, I don't know? So, eventually we did. We played at the Rock Pile. I remember I invited Evan, because we wanted to record the event, so he was there. He was very helpful. And it was overall not a bad show, but it was very quick. Like, 5 songs and we were out. So it wasn't really, and there wasn't a big turnout either. Mostly everyone there was just there for other bands, so it's like, because it was so far north.
That's a running theme.
Yeah. And another running theme is after the show, inexplicably this guy asked me, hey Lyle, how do you feel about the drummer? And I'm like, I don't really spend nearly as much time with him as I do with you because, like, I show stuff to you, and I don't know, I practice more with you than I ever see with him. We don't hang out after practice, so I don't know much about him. It's like, oh, I don't like him. I'm gonna fire him. Why? He's a little intense, but he's a very good player. We're so good together. Why do you want to fire him? It's like, oh, I don't know. So we fired him, and this guy was really pissed off. He would send him messages, like answering machine messages, a lot of the time, just like, oh, I want to be in this band. Why are you kicking me out? And I didn't have any justifiable answer for that. And suffice to say, just like the other band, we never found another drummer afterwards. We had one audition with this other guy. We showed up at this like downtown like rehearsal factory, right? And we walk in, and he's playing, and I saw an empty 6-pack before me. I was like, oh, were you recycling? He's like, oh no, I drank that before you got here. You drank an entire 6-pack before a band audition? Yeah. No, I'm good. And so we're doing some covers, and this guy wanted me to start doing more vocal work, which was a first for me. and I was a little uncomfortable with it, but like I don't know, we were doing like say Today by the Smashing Pumpkins, but I'm pretty good at singing. I like Billy Corgan's voice a lot. And the weird thing is like it's like the drum's like.
Oh, he's trying to double time it.
No, he's just playing during the intro. Oh. It's like he didn't know when to come in. And it's like, what are you doing? You gotta wait. Like, we gotta kick in first. And he's like, oh, no. When I was listening to it, I heard drums. I'm like, what headphones are you using? There's no drums in the intro to Today. So we didn't know. And so we didn't hire him. And after a while, he just kept... This guy kept coming to my house, the guitarist, and we would just do covers, and we practice... And we just keep practicing. There was just no progression. And then, like, one day he sits me down and he's like, okay, Lyle, so I know we've been playing the 10 songs for a while, but I have, like... And I looked down at his iTunes and it was full to the brim with music that he's written. And all of his songs were, like, 6 to 10 minutes long. And I don't feel like it. And I'm just like, all this stuff's starting to blend together. I do
and
like...
why only now? Why only then?
I don't know. And to be honest, like we were not a bad sounding band. I would say we were kind of like a nice combination between like 5440 and Collective Soul. Like it was pretty good hard rock. It was nice. In fact, I was living with this. I was living in this one house at the time with a bunch of construction workers, and there was this guy who was really on my case about all things. He's like, I don't want a band over here playing loud music. I work 8 hours a day at a construction site. I don't want to put up with this shit. And I'm like, okay, we'll keep it down. Like, it's just me and the guitarist. We'll be quiet. We'll just be in the main room. And we played, and afterwards he's like, you guys are really good. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been such a dick. You guys should go places. I'm like, well, thank you. Thanks for that. I'm glad we calmed you down. Okay. Now stop yelling about me about my laundry. But anyways, yeah, but after a while, I was like, I think I should look for something else, because I'm getting tired of practicing. There's no ambition. There's no forward momentum here. We've done one gig in 6 to 8 months. I can't even remember. It just felt like a blur after a while. So then I start looking at Kijiji, and I find another band. And they're like, they're all within my age range. They're more in their more early 30s. And I join I do an audition, and they like me, and they take me on. And eventually I kind of had to make a decision because I don't want to be in two bands. It's hard to be in two bands and stay committed because you'll start leaning, So eventually I called the guy after this practice and I was just like, I think I'm just going to stick with these guys. Because I like their sound. They remind me of noise rock, like the Waves and Fiddler. Like they were very energetic. Like.
And you've said many times you do like yourself some Waves.
I do, and yeah, their music would be right on. They'd be right in sync with like Sunset Overdrive or something. I'm like, nice. I love this kind of music, and I've always wanted to be in a band like this. So that's what kind of eased the transition, honestly. It was an interesting band, honestly. We had a drummer, we had two guitarists who were both left-handed, by the way, super rare, and a singer who had like this nice. He kind of reminded me of Matt's Trey Parker, actually. He just had like this nice kind of juvenile sense of humor, but it was fun. It was simple, straightforward, kind of Beach Boys kind of.
The other person had a juvenile sense of humor, and it was not that fun by the end.
The one thing is that eventually we did a lot of practices. I showed them some of my songs, and they liked it enough. And we actually that song I showed the previous band, they were like, "Oh, it's very punk, but we're not going to play it." Eventually, they added this song to our set list, so that was decent of them. But the problem was that the singer eventually left to go to boot camp. And this was 2019, so, it's like he's going to be gone for a while. And no one else wanted to take the vocal. They didn't want to get a new singer, and they didn't want to step up to the plate, so eventually I did. Which kind of inhibited me a bit, because it's hard to play bass and sing at the exact same time, especially with the riffs I was doing. I kind of felt like I was like the, I forget his name. Like my playing was starting to get a lot better. I was almost starting to sound like the guy from Rancid, Matt Freeman. That's his name. Like I was starting to do a lot more scales and stuff during our playing because it's punk music. I think, contrary to belief, punk bass is not just simple notes. It can be pretty advanced stuff. But I'll move on. Anyways, the problem is that I was starting to notice that the band was kind of losing steam because our singer was really great. He had a lot of energy, and I could not match that, I'm afraid. And then the guitarist started losing like motivation, and our drummer was not. He was a great guy, but like he wasn't really on time a lot of most of the time. Not very proficient. So it got to the point where it's just like we're just practicing, and then by the next year, I was like, okay, well, we'll see you guys later, right? And then things just, you know, when you're on a dating app and no one, you see this girl and it's like, oh, hey, how's it going? It's like, hey, talk for a week, ghosted you. That's what this band did. They eventually ghosted me. And even though the guy was like, oh, Lyle, you're like the MVP of the band, but like, yeah, it just fizzled out, basically. There's not much to say. So eventually, like, 2020 happens, and everybody's stuck because of this virus of unspecified origin, and we're just like stuck at home. I did not want to live in the city because it's scary, and I went to a No Frills and there's no food, and that's not good. I've never seen that before. So I go to my dad's house for a while. I don't know what were you doing. Did you do any writing while you were during the pandemic?
Well, reviewing wise, well, I was still working at the bank, so yeah, being an essential frontline worker during the bank that's not healthcare, yeah, that was a time. It kind of unfortunately killed my motivation to do a lot of creative stuff because, you know, I was wanting whatever spare time I had after my job to myself. Plus, I was working two jobs at the time, so it felt like I was burning the candle at both ends. And let's just say by November, after my fiance and I moved into our current place, and I'm now just working one job, and while it's full time, it's a mix of in office and remote, so it's much better for me, I would say. It's the same company I was working for since 2019, anyways, but like I felt like if I'm dividing, it's the same thing where you said if you tend to lean more towards one band or the other, if you're stuck in two bands, it was the same thing for me. I was trying to do well at one job, but I was feeling like I was split between two, and then meant both were going to suffer as a result. And I played drums less, and even in my current place, I play on my electric kit sometimes, but
That's
it's still kind of hard to get that motivation back.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. During the pandemic, I was very, very bored, and
that's depressing.
I'm sorry.
You could say, yeah, like, wow, we're really depressing tonight.
Well, actually, there's something. Yeah, you could say I was getting a little moody. You could say during the pandemic, and
You mean you weren't already?
I always am. But the idea, the thing
that's
was,
my secret, Cap. I'm always moody.
Well, during the pandemic, my dad noticed I was really missing my bass that I didn't bring with me. He bought me a nice little Bronco bass from the town that we lived in. He just found it online for a really reasonable price. So I started playing with it. It's a very low-end, kind of cheap little thing, but I liked it. It sounded very good on distortion, too. So then I started writing some songs. I wrote stuff like, I wrote a song about some villain from Scooby-Doo, Charlie the Robot. And I started recording stuff about, you know, just basic things. But then I kind of realized, like, I've had this germ of an idea where it's like, what if I wrote an album about a Pixar villain from Toy Story? And that began the genesis, because I had nothing but free time. And even though it was, because everyone knows, like, in pandemic time, it's like, you don't know when this is going to end. So I thought, I'm never going to have this much free time for the rest of my life. I feel like now is the time. So I set myself up for a month just recording an EP using nothing but an acoustic guitar, the Bronco bass, and whatever drum tracks I had on GarageBand. And the reason, I will admit, I was a little rushed for time because I was afraid the strings on this old guitar were going to snap. And being pandemic time, I probably wouldn't have anyone to replace them. And also, I was afraid I would be going back to work within the next month. So, yeah, the production of the album, not as tight as I would have liked. I've learned a hell of a lot since. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how Sid's Room turned out. And I know I've mentioned it. As Cody likes to say, I plug it a lot during the podcast. So I'm not going to go into too more details. But I posted it on the 25th anniversary of Toy Story, which was like 1995. So it's like 2020. It's like, oh, that's funny. And then it's like, it didn't really go viral, unfortunately. But every time I sent it to people, they were very impressed with how it turned out. So I'm pretty pleased with it. It's a nice little milestone in my life where I actually sat down, made something, put it out there, and people liked it. So it was a nice feeling. Yeah, and then I just started to realize like maybe I should just form my own band. So that's where MoodieBoy kind of came into play. And it's I have a guitarist. His name's, well, I'm not gonna get into names, but he's a very nice guy. He's still with me till this day. We had a drummer who was not bad, but like I could tell it was not, he didn't really fit our grungy alternative aesthetic. He was more of a funk guy. So eventually he left, and we still have not found one yet. I'm still looking. I don't know if anyone could come in someday on a practice with a drum kit and play with us, but we'll say, oh, you're giving me daggers. Oh, shoot. But anyways.
Stall for time.
Currently finishing a demo tape right now. It's almost done, and I've got a guy working on a promo for it, actually. He's doing a stop motion music video for it. And he's like, yeah, I loved your album, and I just want to keep working with you, because I think you have a shot. I'm like, oh, that's very nice of you. And, yeah, can't really do gigs. Can't really do much right now.
Not yet, at least. Stuff is starting at this point in time slowly but surely, but it'll really be in 2022 when hopefully you can really get the band off the ground.
It would be nice. I mean, I acknowledge that I'm getting a little older. Most of the heroes I looked up to were in their teens to like their early 20s when they started out. I'm in my mid-20s now, so I'm kind of like feeling like I'm not sure if I'm over the hill yet, but I want to keep doing this.
You're talking to someone who's going to be 30 next year.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but it happens to us all, and I think that's kind of a question I have. It's like, this is like, have you ever seen the documentary Anvil?
Yes, the story.
Yeah.
See, that's interesting in that the documentary actually helped get them a lot of resurgence in the late 2000s, early 2010s. I mean, they even had a 3-pack in Rock Band as DLC, for God's sake. But
that's good.
The overall tone is that they had a lot of potential in the beginning, but then they just kind of petered out towards the end, towards the middle of their career, and it seems like that left them with the main two people with a lot of bitterness that still hasn't really gone away. And I'm like, I do see that as a little bit of a cautionary tale, because like that one person is kind of like that, and that could have been also me.
Yeah, because it gets to the point where you kind of wonder, it's like, when do you have to kind of put down, like, when do you have to hang your boots and say, maybe I should start thinking about, like, more adult things, or because everyone wants to be in a band. It's a fantasy, and, like, there's always like that appeal of like wanting to tour the world and be superstars and be mega famous. That's not really what I want to be, but it'd be nice, you know, to play shows and like maybe grow up into actually being a part of the music industry. That's the dream. But
isn't it always?
Yeah, but yeah, there comes a point where you have to kind of eventually set those aside and maybe, you know, start a family or, you know, develop your career. But there's always, like, you can always, like, put time aside for a side project or something. I'm actually in a cover band right now, too, for, like, we do a lot of Sublime. I wasn't into Sublime so much, but now I really respect them as a group. They were a tight unit. But, yeah, it's just for fun. I wish we played this summer, but, you know, COVID and all. I guess at the end of the day, it's just, like, I think bands can be fun. They can be frustrating, though, and it takes a lot of commitment and perseverance is a word. I would say actually just a lot of initiative. I think that's a good word for it. And if you're in a band where there's not as much initiative or the chemistry is not right, as you said before, or if you're in my case where you're in a band that has no direction and you just practice till your fingers bleed, Yeah, sometimes it does feel like a bit of a time sink at times. But ultimately, I think the best advice I can give is don't try and just don't try and treat it like a career until you go somewhere with it. Don't just quit your job and try to form a band. Because I've met people like that, and it's not a pretty picture. Right? The starving artist thing is kind of a risky business.
It's not even that like especially it's very easy to be a self-starter now if you know about the tools that are available. I mean, you mentioned using GarageBand, but and even with Bandcamp or like play services like DistroKid where they can get you music onto the major streaming services, it costs a little bit, but it's very easy to have a plan in order to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
after I stopped playing in bands, I realized, you know what, I've got some time. I actually went to do some online courses through the platform Coursera, and I actually have a specialization from Berkeley, which
Oh,
is pretty cool because it's the closest thing to going to Berkeley College of Music without actually going to Berkeley College of Music, Berkeley
well,
College
there
of
you
Music.
go. Oh,
No,
that's
because
good.
I as a side note, I've always felt like I know a lot about music. A&R would have been an ideal position for me because it's about trying to get in with what's new and hip and trying to get other people interested in it to like try and sign bands that are very cutting edge. But then I also realized not only do you have to go to school, but you also probably have to be on the younger side, and especially with the industry, if you don't get an internship right away when you're still in school, there's a good chance you probably won't get in the conventional way. But I've been doing some street team work for a few years. Obviously, nothing in the last year or two because reasons. But
Hmm.
between journalism, I think this podcast and music, it's like I would rather help other people make their music known than have my own music known just because I'm very much a background person and I mean I've been very fortunate to be able to network with people and build up those connections, but I'd love to be able to help people that are also willing to put in the work themselves so I can still accomplish what it is I want to do, which is be able to support myself and my partner and a future family, but also still have that creative itch scratched so I don't have to like be away from home all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good that you want to help people produce their own music. I think that's a very important component. Even if I did things like session playing, which I wouldn't mind doing sometime. I know you have to be very, very. You have to have a very wide range of knowledge on your instrument, which I'll admit I might not have. But from what I can see, I do pretty good for myself. But that's just like an example. Like there's many avenues like to be a musician. You don't always have to like just form a band and go out there. But like there's also like artists who can get very popular online. You're right. It's a gamble, but if you're passionate and if you're dedicated, then go for it. I would say it's kind of the same way with filmmaking. Honestly, anyone can basically make music, but to make good music, you have to learn. And I think that's what sometimes holds
And to
people
make
back.
great music, you have to really learn.
Yes, yes, you do.
I mean, I will say to compare the two mediums, I enjoy looking through and when I'm looking. I mean, I've edited work for you and Evan in terms of what's
Oh,
the word, spec scripts. I'm
yeah,
sure
yeah,
I didn't go to
scripts,
film school.
script, yeah,
But
basically
I liked
drafts.
the ideas, and if you have an initial germ of an idea, much like you did with MoodieBoy, it's a lot easier to then add your own interpretation onto things. And when you're working with people that are also in the same creative headspace, I
Yeah,
guess is the right word to use there,
no, that's a good
it
word.
makes it a lot easier to make revisions with their ideas in mind, to just take what's already on the page, or and especially with music, take what's already there and just make it that much better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I never want to dictate to people. I always want to say,
Yes,
try doing your own thing, because like I don't want to be like the previous experiences I've had where I try to be too much in the spotlight and that kind of hampers other people's creativity. I want to have like a platform where other people can express their ideas. It would actually be nice to have like a Neil Peart kind of drummer who helps me with lyrics, because honestly, lyrics slow me down so much in songwriting. I can write
and it
hooks.
depends on the tempo, honestly. Like if you're writing a faster song, like it's easy to get a rhyme scheme to fit that cadence, but you'll want to have it make sense too.
Yeah, That kind of brings me back to like the Sunset Overdrive kind of band where like they would kind of just sing about girls and drugs. And I'm like, okay, you guys are in your 30s. I mean, like, I'm not gonna say your lyrics are embarrassing, but they're not super deep. Literally, our best song was called "The Beach," and it literally went, "Let's go to the beach and do drugs and shit. The beach is gonna be super lit." And that was our chorus.
I mean, that's the core of a TikTok video.
That's a Fiddler song right there.
That's true, actually. That's like a demo idea for a Fiddler song. That would evolve into something like Max Can't Surf.
Yeah. Or like LDA, or like anything from their first album, which was kind of just like, or what was Wake, Skate, Bake or something. Yeah, that song, that kind of stuff. The early days, like when they just bang stuff out, and that's fine. I'm not saying like it's a bad thing. I'm just saying like it's not the kind of music I want to write. I wouldn't mind like, because I've been listening. I would say MoodieBoy, in terms of genres, I kind of want to like go more into like post-punk or something a bit more like interesting, you know.
You probably can't see this in the audio, but he's wearing he's wearing an Unknown Pleasure shirt, so he should know a thing or two about post-punk.
I mean, yeah, maybe I'm a little surface level saying that, but I'd like to experiment more. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, but anyways, I think I'm pretty tapped out as far as that goes, unless you have anything else to add for people who are curious about.
I mean, I think I do a little bit. This whole experience has really attuned me to actually just wanting to do more in terms of songwriting. I mean, as an example, Greg Alexander of New Radicals, you know, even though you only really know the band for a couple of songs at most, mainly You Get What You Give, Someday We'll Know, maybe a deeper B-side like Mother We Just Can't Get Enough, there was a lot of good songwriting depth that he brought to that group, that when that band broke up only after a year, he still wrote a bunch of other songs for other artists, and he's a really good songwriter because musically everything he does just has so much depth behind it. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I hope to do. I just want to make other people better, and you know, and even in a production sense, or like even with like writing stuff, I don't want to basically say, hey, this line of dialogue sucks, change it. I just want to be like, there's something here, just make it a little snappier, make it fit more in line with what, you know, how at least I think that character is, and bring in a little more wit, maybe a little bit more, you know, that je ne sais quoi, that, yeah, see, you know, may actually, it may have been something you weren't even thinking of.
See, that's constructive. That's something you can build off of. That's a lot better than just saying, oh, that sucks, throw that away, it's garbage. Because, like, yeah, I mean, like, even if you write songs that aren't good, just write more songs. I mean, like, yeah, the Beatles had a huge library, but I'm sure that before then they had a lot of stuff that probably didn't make the cutting room floor.
You know, it's actually, I do have a bit of a story because we still got some time here.
A little bit, but yeah, we should get
a little bit. In 2015, I was like, just sort of like, in 2015 and 16, I would like write some songs in my spare time, sort of inspired by certain bands I had been listening to around that time, but I felt they were pretty unique ideas. I wrote one called Full Circle, basically sort of reflecting on that like very short relationship I had. It only lasted about 7 months, but you know, it didn't really feel that long in retrospect, but just like sort of being honest with myself about my sort of feelings on life, and you know, after seeing that person again the next year, it just kind of felt like I guess things had come full circle in a sense, because you know, maybe things weren't supposed to end the way we thought they were, and I just have that stuff at the end of, are you finally free? And was that all you wanted from me? So just kind of like, there's some depth there. And I even wrote like a pup-inspired song called Dreamer for Hire when I was still in school about cool. Yeah, my job prospects kind of suck right now. And I really I'm not 100% sure the major I'm in is what I want to do for a living. But as the end of it went, I might as well do with what I've got.
That's really nice. I have bursts of creativity one time. I remember I wrote like 6 songs on acoustic guitar. I don't remember them anymore, but I remember one was like, I met Keanu Reeves on Tinder. Whoa. But anyways.
Well, I mean, you know, you could rework that, because there is that new Matrix movie that'll get you a little bit of attention.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I should capitalize on that. You're right. I should.
You heard it here first.
I have been red-pilled. Anyways.
No, heart-pilled, coming soon. I know you've been dropping hints a whole bunch throughout this thing. Right now, I'm waiting until Marnie and I can actually get a house, which maybe in the next year, maybe in the next 2 years, and then I can actually have my drums in an actual space of our own, and then maybe when the time is right, I will get back to that. But
yeah.
I think right now my skills are needed elsewhere.
I understand that, and yeah, for sure. Also the distance is kind of a hindrance as well.
On both of our ends, it's not super ideal.
Yeah, I know. And Veronica and I, good news, are eventually going to move in together next year, so that's exciting. Our parents have bought this house, and they're just like remodeling it, and they're just giving us this basement to ourselves, and it's like right on. And it's gonna be like we're gonna be like moving into Etobicoke, and it's like that's kind of a jump, but I know it's gonna be kind of hard to see my friends now because some of them live in East York, some of them live in Richmond Hill. But I mean, it's still like a nice step forward, and I'm happy about that. And who knows? And we're even like she's even setting aside a room in the place for like my recording sessions. And maybe places for my band to practice. And I'm thinking that's pretty cool. I'm glad you see some potential. And yeah, that's a nice little footnote in our upcoming future. And with that, yeah, I think that's a nice wrap. Thank you for joining us on So to Speak. And keep on rocking in the free world.
No talking, no new crap. End this episode now.
Music sucks, man.
Let's go to the beach and do drugs and shit. The beach is gonna be super lit. Let's go to the beach and do drugs and shit. The beach is gonna be super lit.